Emma stood in the corner of the drawing room, her face burning with shame. The afternoon light streaming through the tall windows seemed to highlight everything she wasn't, everything her family found lacking. "Look at her," Mother's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Too plain, too quiet. No man would ever want such a creature." The cruel laughter of her sisters filled the room. Margaret and Catherine, with their golden curls and rosy cheeks, had suitors calling every day. But Emma was different. And in their world, different meant worthless. She pressed her back against the wall, wishing she could disappear. Her brown hair hung simply around her face, her gray eyes downcast. While her sisters practiced their music and embroidery, Emma read books. While they gossiped about fashion, she tended to injured birds in the garden. While they simpered and fluttered, she spoke her mind, when she dared to speak at all. "You bring nothing but shame to this family," Mother continued, her voice growing sharper. "Your father left us drowning in debt before he died. Now you must pay for your existence." Emma's heart began to race. What did Mother mean? A cold dread settled in her stomach. Lord Marcus Ashworth needs a servant for his estate in the northern mountains. He's particular about his requirements. No pretty faces to distract him, no chattering, just someone to work. Margaret giggled behind her fan. "Oh, Emma's perfect then. She's practically invisible already." "People say he's cruel," Catherine added with delight. "They say his face is horribly scarred from the war, that he never speaks to anyone. Servants run away in the middle of the night." Emma's hands began to tremble. Mother's meaning became horrifyingly clear. "You leave at dawn tomorrow," Mother declared with finality. "Lord Ashworth has agreed to take you in exchange for a portion of your father's debt. Don't expect to return. This arrangement is permanent. Perhaps isolation will teach you the value of gratitude." The room spun around Emma. Sold. She was being sold like livestock to pay for her father's mistakes. Her sisters' faces showed nothing but relief. Finally, the family embarrassment would be gone. That night, Emma packed her meager belongings by candlelight. One worn dress. 2 precious books her father had given her in secret. A small pouch of healing herbs she'd learned to use from the village wise woman. Each item felt like a lifeline to who she really was. Through the thin walls, she could hear Margaret and Catherine whispering excitedly about the balls they'd attend now that Emma wouldn't be there to dampen their prospects. Each giggle felt like another nail in the coffin of her old life. Emma caught her reflection in the small mirror above her washstand. Plain, they called her. Worthless. Too quiet. Too serious. Too much trouble. Maybe they were right. Maybe she deserved this fate. But somewhere deep inside, a small flame flickered. She could read Latin. She could heal wounded creatures. She could work harder than anyone. Maybe that would be enough to survive whatever waited for her in the mountains. Morning came too quickly. The hired carriage waited in the gray dawn, its black form looking like a hearse. Mother didn't even come down to see her off. Margaret waved cheerfully from an upstairs window, already planning how to redecorate Emma's former room. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, helped her with her single bag. "I'm sorry, miss," he whispered. "Heard about where you're bound." "Lord Marcus, well, he hasn't had much luck keeping staff." The journey north took 3 days through increasingly wild countryside. Rolling green hills gave way to rocky crags and dense forests. The air grew thin and cold as they climbed higher into the mountains. With each mile, Emma felt further from everything she'd ever known. On the final afternoon, the carriage rounded a bend, and there it was, Ashworth Manor. The gray stone fortress perched on a cliff, like a bird of prey, its towers reaching towards stormy clouds. No warm lights glowed in its windows. No gardens softened its harsh lines. It looked exactly like the prison Emma expected it to be. "This is as far as I go, miss," the driver said gently. "Good luck to you." Emma shouldered her bag and walked toward the massive oak doors. Before she could knock, they swung open to reveal a stern-faced woman in black. "You must be the new girl," the woman said without warmth. "I'm Mrs. Hartwell, the housekeeper. You're late." The carriage was delayed by... Lord Marcus doesn't tolerate excuses. Come. Emma followed her through corridors lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors. Dust motes danced in shafts of weak sunlight. The silence felt heavy, oppressive, as if the house itself were holding its breath. "Your duties begin at dawn," Mrs. Hartwell explained as they walked. "You'll tend the fires in the east wing, clean the library, and help in the kitchens. Lord Marcus keeps to himself mostly, But when he requires something, you respond immediately. Never ask questions, never stare, and whatever you do, never mention his condition. They stopped outside a plain wooden door. Your room. Supper is at 6. Be punctual. Emma's new home was a small chamber in the servants' quarters, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window overlooking the courtyard. She sat on the hard mattress and tried not to cry. This was her life now. This cold, silent fortress was all she would ever know. That evening, Emma made her way to the kitchens, where she met the other servants, a handful of quiet souls who'd learned to move like ghosts through the corridors. Cook, a plump woman named Mrs. Davies, was the only one who showed her any kindness. "Don't mind the others," she whispered, as she served Emma a bowl of thin soup. "They're all afraid. He's been here the longest of any staff he's had. Walking on eggshells, they are." "What happened to him?" Emma asked quietly. "In the war?" Mrs. Davies glanced around nervously. "Took shrapnel to the face at Waterloo. Nearly died. Came back. Changed. Angry. Hasn't left the ground since. Some say the scars go deeper than skin." As if summoned by their whispers, heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor above. Everyone in the kitchen froze. The footsteps paused, then continued to what Emma assumed was Lord Marcus's private chambers. "He walks the halls at night," one of the maids whispered, "like a ghost himself." That first night, Emma lay awake listening to those footsteps, slow, deliberate, endless. A man pacing away his demons in the darkness above her head. Despite everything, her heart ached for him. She knew what it felt like to be unwanted, cast aside, and judged by appearances alone. Emma's first week passed in a blur of unfamiliar tasks. She rose before dawn to light fires throughout the cold stone corridors. She scrubbed floors, dusted furniture, and helped Mrs. Davis prepare meals that were carried up on trays. Lord Marcus never ate with his staff. It was while cleaning the library that she first encountered him. She was reaching for a book on a high shelf, trying to dust behind it, when she heard the door creak. Thinking it was Mrs. Hartwell checking her work, she continued stretching upward. "What are you doing?" The voice was deep, rough, and filled with barely controlled anger. Emma spun around so quickly she nearly lost her balance on the ladder. Lord Marcus Ashworth stood in the doorway like an avenging angel. He was taller than she'd imagined, broad-shouldered beneath his dark coat. His black hair was longer than fashion dictated, as if he'd stopped caring about such things. But it was his face that made her breath catch. The left side was unmarked, aristocratic features that would have made him devastatingly handsome. The right side bore the evidence of his war wounds, raised scars that pulled at his skin, making his smile, if he ever smiled, forever crooked. His right eye was clouded, probably blind. But his left eye blazed with intelligence, pain, and fury. "I asked you a question." His voice could have frozen fire. Emma realized she'd been staring exactly what Mrs. Hartwell had warned her never to do. "I'm sorry, my lord. I was dusting the shelves." "Dusting?" He moved into the room, and Emma noticed his slight limp. "And what gives you the right to handle my books?" "Mrs. Hartwell assigned me to clean the library, my lord. I was being careful." "Careful?" He stepped closer, and Emma could see the network of fine scars across his temple. "These books are worth more than you could earn in 10 lifetimes. Some are irreplaceable." Emma's temper flared, the same spirit that had gotten her in trouble at home. Then her hum. The moment the words left her mouth, she knew she'd made a terrible mistake. Lord Marcus went completely still, his good eye narrowing dangerously. "You think you know about books, do you?" His voice was deadly quiet. Emma lifted her chin, knowing she was probably about to be thrown out into the snow, but unable to stop herself. "I can read, my lord. Latin as well as English. My father taught me before he died." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or suspicion. "Prove it." He pulled a leather-bound volume from the shelf and thrust it at her. Emma recognized it immediately. Ovid's Metamorphoses, her father's favorite. She opened to a random page and began to read aloud in Latin, then translated the passage into English. It was the story of Pygmalion, the sculptor who fell in love with his own creation. When she finished, silence filled the library. Lord Marcus was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. "Where did you come from?" he asked finally. "Yorkshire, my lord. My mother sent me here when—" She stopped, unwilling to admit the full shame of being sold to pay debts. "When what?" When she decided I was of no use to the family, something shifted in his expression. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition. "You'll continue cleaning the library," he said abruptly, "but you'll ask before moving any of the rare volumes. Some are centuries old." "Yes, my lord." He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "What's your name?" "Emma, my lord, Emma Whitmore." He nodded once, and left without another word, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. Emma stood there for a long moment, her heart racing. She'd expected cruelty and found something else. Pain, maybe. Loneliness. A man as wounded and cast aside as she was. Over the following weeks, Lord Marcus began appearing in the library more frequently. He never spoke to Emma directly, but she sensed him watching as she worked. Sometimes she would find books left open on his desk, always in Latin or Greek, as if he were testing her knowledge. Emma began leaving her own subtle responses. If he left out a passage from Virgil, she might place a bookmark at a related verse from Horace. When he left philosophical texts open, she would carefully dust around them, sometimes daring to leave a different volume nearby that offered a counter-argument. It became a strange, silent conversation conducted entirely through ancient texts. The first time Lord Marcus spoke to her again, Emma was tending the fire in the library during a fierce winter storm. She thought he was in his chambers, but when she turned from the hearth, he was sitting at his desk watching her. "You handle fire well," he observed. "My father taught me," he said. "Fire was like emotion, dangerous if ignored, useful if properly tended." "Your father sounds like he was a wise man." "He was." Emma poked at the logs, sending sparks up the chimney. "He used to say that books and fire were humanity's greatest gifts, one to preserve knowledge, the other to survive the darkness. Yet both can destroy as easily as they create." Emma looked at him then, really looked. In the firelight, his scars seemed less harsh, more like marks of survival than disfigurement. "Only if we let them, my lord." Something in his expression softened. "You're not what I expected when they told me a servant was coming." "What did you expect?" "Someone who would keep their head down, follow orders without question. Certainly not someone who would argue with me about the proper care of books." Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I apologize for my boldness, my lord. My mother always said my tongue would be my downfall." "Your mother sounds like a fool." The blunt statement surprised Emma so much she almost dropped the poker. Lord Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Tell me about your family," he said. "The truth this time." So Emma did. She told him about her beautiful sisters and their endless suitors, about her mother's disappointment in having a plain, bookish daughter, about her father's secret lessons and his mounting debts, about the morning she woke to find herself sold like cattle to pay for mistakes that weren't her own. Lord Marcus listened without interruption, his expression growing darker as the story progressed. "They cast you out because you didn't fit their narrow definition of valuable," he said when she finished. "How familiar that sounds." "My lord, my own family disowned me when I returned from Waterloo. Apparently a scarred son reflects poorly on the family name. Better to let people assume I died gloriously in battle than see what war actually costs." Emma's heart clenched. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It taught me that people only value what they can see and use. Beauty, wealth, status, everything else is disposable." "That's not true," Emma said before she could stop herself. His laugh was bitter. "Isn't it? Look at us, the plain daughter, and the ruined lord, hidden away where we can't embarrass anyone." "Maybe they're the ones who should be embarrassed," Emma said quietly. "Maybe they're the ones missing out." Lord Marcus stared at her for a long moment, and Emma saw something she hadn't expected in his expression. Hope. Fragile as a soap bubble. "Perhaps," he said finally, "perhaps they are." As winter began to loosen its grip on the mountains, Emma discovered that Lord Marcus had another passion besides books: his garden. It wasn't the formal, manicured space she expected, but a wild tangle of herbs and healing plants hidden behind the main house. She found it by accident while hanging laundry in the courtyard. A gate she'd assumed was locked stood slightly ajar, revealing glimpses of green beyond. Curiosity won over caution, and she slipped inside. The garden was extraordinary. Rows of medicinal herbs grew in careful disorder. Chamomile for calming, willow bark for pain, and feverfew for headaches. Someone had created this space with knowledge and love despite its wild appearance. "You shouldn't be here." Emma spun to find Lord Marcus emerging from behind a greenhouse she hadn't noticed. but his voice lacked its usual sharp edge. If anything, he sounded resigned. "I'm sorry, my lord. The gate was open, and I've never seen such a beautiful garden." "Beautiful?" He looked genuinely surprised. "It's barely controlled chaos." "It's perfect," Emma said, meaning it. "Each plant has its purpose, its place, like a library, but growing." Something in his expression shifted. "You know about herbs?" "A little. The village wise woman taught me some healing basics before." She gestured vaguely, indicating her exile. Lord Marcus was quiet for a moment, then made a decision that surprised them both. "Come. I'll show you what I've been working on." He led her through the garden, pointing out plants she recognized and many she didn't. His knowledge was extensive, clearly the result of years of study and careful cultivation. "I started this after I came back," he explained. As they paused beside a patch of valerian, the doctor's treatments were inadequate. I had to find my own ways to manage the pain. "Physical pain?" Emma asked gently. "All kinds." He touched his scarred temple unconsciously. Turns out ancient remedies often work better than modern medicine. They spent the afternoon in the garden, and Emma saw a different side of Lord Marcus, patient, knowledgeable, and almost peaceful among his plants. When he showed her how to properly harvest comfrey root, his hands were gentle and skilled. "You could help me," he said suddenly, as the sun began to set. "If you're interested, the garden needs more attention than I can give it alone." Emma's heart leaped. "I would love that, my lord." "Marcus," he said quietly, in the garden, just Marcus. It was the first time he'd ever offered her his name. Spring brought transformation to both the garden and the strange relationship developing between Emma and Marcus. She spent her mornings fulfilling her household duties and her afternoons working beside him among the plants. Marcus proved to be an excellent teacher, patient when she made mistakes, encouraging when she showed aptitude. He taught her to read the subtle signs that indicated when plants were ready for harvest, how to dry herbs properly to preserve their potency, and which combinations worked best for different ailments. "You have natural instincts for this," he told her one afternoon, as she successfully identified a plant's readiness by touch alone. "Better than mine was when I started." Emma flushed with pride. It had been so long since anyone had praised her abilities rather than criticized her failures. They began talking as they worked, first about plants and healing, then about books, philosophy, and life itself. Emma discovered that Marcus was incredibly well-read, with opinions on everything from agricultural policy to poetry. He, in turn, seemed surprised by her insights and knowledge. "Your father educated you well," he said one day, as they debated the merits of different translation approaches to Homer. "Too well, according to my mother. She said it made me unsuitable for marriage." Marcus's hands stilled on the plant he was pruning. Any man who would be intimidated by an intelligent wife isn't worthy of one. The compliment, casual as it was, made Emma's heart flutter in a way she tried not to examine too closely. As the days grew warmer, Marcus began to relax around her. His smiles came more easily, crooked due to his scars, but genuine and surprisingly charming. He laughed at her observations about the pompous roosters in the courtyard. He even let her see him without his coat, working in just his shirt sleeves, as they prepared new garden beds. Emma found herself looking forward to their afternoon sessions with an eagerness that had nothing to do with plants and everything to do with the man teaching her. The way his eyes lit up when discussing a particularly interesting botanical property, the careful way he guided her hands when showing her a delicate technique, the moments when he forgot to be guarded and let her see glimpses of who he'd been before the war. But it was the evening she found him collapsed in the garden that everything changed. She'd returned to retrieve a tool she'd forgotten, and found him unconscious beside the greenhouse, his face gray with pain. The old war wound in his leg had reopened, blood seeping through his trousers. Without thinking, Emma took charge. She'd helped the village healer with enough emergencies to know what to do. She cleaned the wound, applied a poultice of comfrey and calendula from his own garden, and bandaged it properly. Marcus came to as she was finishing, his eyes unfocused and confused. "Emma?" She soothed, her hand cool against his fevered forehead. "You're safe, but you need to rest. This wound needs time to heal properly." He tried to sit up and winced. "I can't. People will see." Emma understood. He'd been hiding his pain, his weakness, just as she'd been hiding her hurts. The difference was, she'd been forced to be strong alone. He'd chosen it. "No one has to know," she promised. I'll tell Mrs. Hartwell you're indisposed with a headache. I'll bring your meals to your chambers and help you care for the wound until it heals. Why would you do that? Emma looked down at him, this proud, wounded man who'd shown her more kindness in a few months than her family had in years, and realized the truth that had been growing in her heart. Because you matter to me, she said simply. Something shifted in Marcus's expression. His good hand reached up to touch her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she didn't realize had fallen. Emma, he whispered, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. For the next week, Emma tended Marcus with the same careful attention he'd taught her to give his plants. She brought him meals, changed his bandages, and prepared herbal teas to manage his pain. But more than that, she simply stayed with him. In the quiet of his chambers, with his defenses lowered by pain and fever, Marcus began to share pieces of himself he'd kept locked away. He told her about the battle where he'd been wounded, not just his body but also his faith in humanity, about comrades who died in his arms, about returning home to find that society valued him only as a war hero, not as a broken man trying to heal. I used to believe in honor, he said one evening as Emma prepared a fresh poultice. Duty, service. The idea that if you fought for what was right, you'd be rewarded with respect and belonging. You don't believe that anymore? How can I? Look what honor got me. A ruined face, a damaged leg, and a family who pretends I don't exist. Emma's hands stilled on the bandage. Honor isn't about what others give you in return. It's about who you choose to be when no one's watching. Marcus looked at her, really looked, and Emma saw the exact moment. Something inside him cracked open. When did you become so wise? He asked softly. When I realized that the people who rejected me were wrong about what makes someone valuable. That night, as she sat reading beside his bed while he slept, Marcus reached out unconsciously and took her hand. Emma didn't pull away. For the first time in her life, she felt truly needed, truly wanted for who she was, rather than who someone expected her to be. When Marcus recovered enough to return to the garden, something fundamental had changed between them. The careful distance they'd maintained was gone, replaced by something deeper and more dangerous. Emma caught him watching her as she worked, his expression soft with an emotion she was afraid to name. When he handed her tools, their fingers lingered together. When she stumbled on uneven ground, his arms caught her and held her longer than necessary. The breaking point came on an evening in late spring. They'd been working to establish a new section of the garden when a sudden thunderstorm forced them to take shelter in the greenhouse. Rain drummed on the glass roof as they waited out the storm, creating an intimate cocoon of sound and shadow. Marcus was standing close enough that Emma could see the fine lines around his eyes and the way his dark hair curled slightly in the humidity. Emma, he said quietly, and something in his voice made her look up at him. Yes, I need to tell you something. These past months, you've changed everything for me. Emma's heart began to race. Marcus, I know I have no right. I'm scarred, damaged. I live like a hermit in this mountain fortress, but you see something in me that I thought died at Waterloo. I see who you really are, Emma whispered. Not the scars, not the wounds, you. Marcus stepped closer, his good hand rising to cup her face. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever known. I'm not beautiful, everyone's always said. They're blind fools, Marcus said fiercely. Your intelligence, your courage, your kindness, that's true beauty. The way you care for injured creatures, the way you lose yourself in a good book, the way you argue with me when you think I'm wrong, that's what takes my breath away. Emma felt tears spill over. No one's ever said. Then they were all idiots who didn't deserve you. And then he was kissing her, soft and careful and desperate all at once. Emma had never been kissed before, but it felt like coming home, like finding a piece of herself she hadn't known was missing. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. I love you, Marcus said against her forehead. I know I shouldn't. I know it's impossible, but I love you too, Emma interrupted, and watched his face transform with wonder. Their happiness lasted exactly 3 weeks. Emma should have known it was too good to be true, that life wouldn't let her keep something so precious without a fight. The blow came in the form of a letter delivered on a gray morning in early summer. Mrs. Hartwell brought it to the library, where Emma was cataloging Marcus's rare book collection, a task he'd given her that felt more like a privilege than work. For you, miss, the housekeeper said with obvious disapproval, from Yorkshire. Emma's blood turned to ice. The elegant handwriting on the envelope belonged to her mother. With shaking hands, she broke the seal and read, "Emma, your sister Catherine is to be married to Sir James Whitfield, a connection that could restore our family's fortunes. However, Sir James has heard unsavory rumors about a daughter in service. You will return home immediately to be present for the wedding, properly dressed and behaved, so that our family appears complete and respectable. A carriage will arrive for you tomorrow. Do not shame us further by refusing. Mother." Emma sank into the nearest chair, the letter trembling in her hands. Return home. Leave Marcus. But she knew her mother. This wasn't a request. It was a command, backed by all the social pressure their small community could bring to bear. If Emma refused, the scandal would ruin Catherine's marriage prospects and confirm every cruel thing their mother had ever said about her. Bad news? Marcus appeared in the doorway, taking one look at her face and crossing immediately to her side. "I have to go home," Emma managed. "My sister's wedding. My mother insists." Marcus read the letter over her shoulder, his expression growing darker with each line. "She has no right," he said flatly. "You don't belong to her anymore. You belong here, with me." "You don't understand," Emma said miserably. "If I don't go, if I cause a scandal, it will destroy Catherine's chances. She never did anything wrong. She doesn't deserve to pay for my choices." "And what about what you deserve?" Marcus's voice was sharp with pain. "What about your happiness, your life?" Emma looked at him. This man who'd taught her what love could be, who'd shown her that she was worthy of respect and care. The thought of leaving him felt like tearing out her own heart. "I don't have a choice," she whispered.
"There's always a choice," Marcus exploded, then immediately gentled his tone. "Emma, please, don't let them drag you back into that life. You've grown so much, become so much more than they ever allowed you to be. Don't let them diminish you again."
"It's just for the wedding," Emma said, trying to convince herself as much as him. "A few weeks at most, then I'll come back." But they both knew she was lying. Once her family had their claws in her again, once she was back in that world of constant criticism and diminishment, would she have the strength to leave again? Marcus took her hands, his grip desperate. "Marry me." Emma's breath caught. "What?" "Marry me, right now, today. If you're my wife, they can't compel you to return. You'll be free of them forever." Emma's heart soared and shattered simultaneously. "Marcus, I can't, we can't. What would people say? A lord marrying his servant? I don't care what people say. I never have. But you should care. Your reputation, your standing, are worthless without you," Marcus said fiercely. "Emma, I was dead before you came here. You brought me back to life. Don't ask me to die again." Emma closed her eyes, torn between love and duty, between the happiness she'd found and the responsibility she couldn't escape. "I need time to think," she said finally. But time was the one thing they didn't have. The carriage arrived at dawn the next morning, just as her mother had promised. Emma stood in the courtyard with her small bag, the same one she'd arrived with months ago. But she wasn't the same girl who'd been cast out in shame. Marcus had changed her, made her see her own worth. Whatever happened, she would carry that knowledge with her always. Marcus appeared at her side, his face set in grim lines. "I won't say goodbye," he told her. "This isn't goodbye." "Marcus, promise me something," he interrupted. "Promise me you won't let them convince you that you're less than you are. Promise me you'll remember what we built here." Emma reached up and touched his scarred cheek, memorizing every line of his beloved face. "I promise," she whispered. And then she climbed into the carriage that would take her back to her old life, leaving her heart behind in the mountain fortress with the man who taught her how to love. The journey south felt like traveling backward through time. With each mile, Emma felt the confidence she'd built with Marcus slipping away, replaced by the old familiar weight of inadequacy. Home looked exactly the same. The grand house her father had struggled to maintain, now obviously in decline despite her mother's efforts to preserve appearances. Her sisters greeted her return with cool politeness rather than warmth, clearly viewing her as a necessary inconvenience for Catherine's wedding preparations. "Oh, Emma," Catherine sighed when she saw her. "What have you done to yourself? You look so different." Emma caught her reflection in the hall mirror and realized Catherine was right. Months of good food, fresh air, and Marcus's care had given her a glow she'd never possessed before. Her posture was straighter, her eyes brighter. She looked like a woman who knew her own worth. "Mountain air," she said simply. Margaret sniffed. Well, we'll need to do something about your appearance before the wedding. Mother's arranged for the seamstress to alter one of Catherine's old gowns for you. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of wedding preparations that Emma felt utterly disconnected from. She went through the motions, fittings, planning sessions, receiving instruction on proper behavior at social events, but her heart remained in the mountains with Marcus. At night, she lay in her old room and counted the days. How long before she could return? What excuse could she make to leave again without causing a scandal? But her mother, it seemed, had other plans. "I've been thinking," Mother announced over breakfast on the third day. "This arrangement has worked out well for everyone. Emma's been properly humbled by her time in service. She's learned her place. Perhaps it's time she contributed to the family in a more meaningful way." Emma's blood chilled. "What do you mean?" "Mr. Thornton from the village has expressed interest in marriage. He's a widower with children who needs a practical wife, not a pretty one. Emma would suit him perfectly." The room spun around Emma. "You can't be serious." "I'm perfectly serious. You're 23 years old, Emma. Past the age where you can afford to be particular. Mr. Thornton is offering a reasonable settlement, and it would solve the problem of what to do with you permanently." "I won't do it," Emma said, finding her voice at last. "I won't marry a man I don't love." Margaret laughed. "Love? Emma, you can't seriously believe someone like you deserves a love match. Be practical." "Someone like me." Emma stood up slowly, feeling something shift inside her, the same strength Marcus had helped her discover. "What exactly am I like, Margaret?" Her sister faltered at Emma's tone. "Well, you're not beautiful, charming, accomplished in all the feminine graces?" Emma's voice grew stronger with each word. "You're right. I'm not any of those things, but I am intelligent. I'm capable. I'm brave enough to speak my mind, and strong enough to survive being cast out by my own family. I'm worthy of respect, worthy of kindness, and yes, worthy of love." The room had gone dead silent. Emma's mother stared at her as if she'd grown a second head. "How dare you?" "No," Emma interrupted, feeling Marcus's influence in her spine, in her lifted chin, and in her steady voice. "How dare you? How dare you try to convince me I'm worthless when I know better now? How dare you sell me to pay father's debts and then try to sell me again for your own convenience? You ungrateful." "I'm not ungrateful. I'm awake, and I won't be diminished by you anymore." Emma turned and walked out of the dining room, leaving her family gaping behind her. She went straight to her room, packed her bag, and prepared to leave. She was pulling on her cloak when Catherine appeared in the doorway. "Where are you going?" "Home," Emma said simply. "Back to where I belong." "Emma, you can't just leave. The wedding is in 3 days. Mother will never forgive you." Emma looked at her sister, really looked. Catherine was beautiful, yes, but there was something brittle about her beauty, something anxious in her eyes. "Kath," she said gently, "are you happy? Really happy with Sir James?" Catherine's facade cracked slightly. "He's suitable. Mother says I should be grateful." "That's not what I asked." Catherine was quiet for a moment. "He's not unkind," she said finally, "and he'll provide well for me. That's what marriage is, isn't it? Security?" Emma's heart ached for her sister. "It doesn't have to be. I know what real love looks like now, and it's nothing like settling for not unkind." "Not all of us can afford your romantic notions, Emma." "Maybe not, but we all deserve better than what Mother thinks we're worth." Emma hugged her sister goodbye and walked downstairs, where her mother waited in the front hall like a general preparing for battle. "If you leave this house now, you are no longer my daughter," Mother declared. Emma paused at the door and looked back at the woman who'd given her life but never her love. "I stopped being your daughter the day you sold me," she said quietly. "The difference is, now I'm grateful." The journey back to the mountains felt like the longest of Emma's life. She'd managed to hire a mail coach that would take her part of the way, but the final miles to Ashworth Manor had to be covered on foot. As she walked up the familiar mountain path, her heart pounded with a mixture of hope and terror. What if Marcus had changed his mind? What if her leaving had convinced him she didn't truly care? What if her family was right, and she was a fool for believing in love? But as the manor came into view, Emma knew she'd made the right choice. This was home, not the house where she'd been born, but the place where she discovered who she really was. Mrs. Hartwell answered her knock with obvious surprise. "Miss Emma, we didn't expect that as his lordship said you'd return to your family permanently." "Where is he?" Emma asked, her voice breathless from the long walk and her racing heart. "In the garden, miss. He's spent every day there since you left. Barely eating, barely sleeping, just working among the plants like a man possessed." Emma didn't wait to hear more. She dropped her bag and ran toward the garden, her heart singing with every step. She found Marcus exactly where Mrs. Hartwell had said he'd be, kneeling among the herb beds they'd planted together. But the sight of him made her heart clench. He looked thinner and older, as if her absence had drained something vital from him. "Marcus." He went completely still at the sound of her voice, then slowly raised his head. When he saw her standing at the garden gate, the tool in his hand dropped to the earth. "Emma," his voice was hoarse, disbelieving. "You're here. You came back." "I'm home," she said simply. Marcus rose to his feet slowly, as if he were afraid sudden movement might make her disappear. "Your family, the wedding. They can manage without me. I realized I don't owe them my life in payment for their disappointment." "Emma." Marcus started toward her, then stopped, uncertainty flickering across his face. When you left, I thought I'd lost you forever." "Never," Emma said fiercely. "You taught me to know my own worth, Marcus. I could never go back to being the girl who believed she deserved nothing." "And Mr. Thornton? Your mother's plans?" Emma laughed, feeling lighter than she had in days. "I told my mother exactly what I thought of her plans. I'm fairly certain I'm no longer welcome in that house." "Good," Marcus said with savage satisfaction. Then, more gently, "But where will you go? What will you do?" Emma took a step closer, then another, until they were standing just inches apart. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you still want to marry me." Marcus's face transformed, hope and joy and love blazing across his features. "Emma Whitmore, I have wanted to marry you since the day you argued with me about proper book care. Is that a yes?" Instead of answering with words, Marcus cupped her face in his hands and kissed her with all the love and longing and desperate relief of a man who thought he'd lost everything and found it again. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless and laughing and crying at the same time. "Marry me tomorrow," Marcus said urgently. "Today, right now. I never want to risk losing you again." "Yes," Emma whispered against his lips. "Yes to everything. Yes to marriage. Yes to love. Yes to building a life together in this beautiful, impossible place. Even though I'm scarred and difficult, and half mad from the war." Emma traced the lines of his face, loving every mark, every imperfection that made him uniquely hers. "Especially then," she said. "You're not broken, Marcus. You're healing, and I want to be part of that healing for the rest of our lives." Emma stood in the garden, her hands full of fresh herbs, and her heart full of contentment. The morning sun painted everything golden, the plants she and Marcus had nurtured together, the greenhouse where they'd shared their first kiss, and the mountain peaks that had witnessed their love story unfold. A year of marriage had changed them both. Marcus smiled easily now, the deep lines of pain around his eyes replaced by laugh lines earned through days of shared joy. His limp was less pronounced, his nightmares less frequent. Love, Emma had discovered, was indeed a powerful healer. As for herself, she barely recognized the timid girl who'd arrived at the manor in shame and fear. That girl had believed her worth was measured by others' opinions. This woman knew her value came from within, from her intelligence, her compassion, her strength, and yes, from the love of a good man who saw all of those qualities clearly. "Mrs. Ashworth." Emma turned to find Marcus approaching, and her heart still fluttered at the sight of him. He'd grown his hair out longer, and it suited him. The formal distance he'd once maintained was gone, replaced by easy affection and the comfortable intimacy of two people who truly knew each other. "Lord Ashworth," she replied with mock formality. "The vicar is here. Are you ready for visitors?" Emma smiled. They'd opened their home once a month to villagers seeking herbal remedies and medical advice, a practice that had slowly earned them acceptance and respect in the local community. It turned out that people were far more interested in Marcus's knowledge and Emma's healing skills than they were in his scars or her humble origins. "Almost. Just let me finish gathering the feverfew." Marcus moved to help her, their movements synchronized by months of working together. As he reached for a high branch, Emma noticed the letter tucked into his coat pocket. "News from London?" Marcus's expression grew thoughtful. "An invitation, actually. The Royal Society wants me to speak about our medicinal herb research." Emma's eyes widened. "Marcus, that's wonderful. You should accept. Only if you'll come with me." as my partner in this work as well as in life. The offer took Emma's breath away. A year ago, she would never have imagined herself in London society, presenting research to learned men. But Marcus believed in her abilities, absolutely, and his confidence had taught her to believe in herself. "What would I wear?" she asked teasingly. "Something that shows the world exactly who you are," Marcus replied seriously. "The brilliant, accomplished woman I fell in love with." Emma set down her basket and reached up to kiss him, tasting sunshine and promise in the future they were building together. "I love you," she murmured against his lips. "And I love you, my beautiful, impossible, perfectly imperfect wife." As they walked back toward the manor together, Emma caught their reflection in the greenhouse windows. Two people who'd been broken by the world's cruelty and healed by each other's love. She thought of her family, probably still gossiping about her scandalous departure. She thought of the London society they'd soon encounter, with all its judgments and expectations. Let them think what they wished. Emma Ashworth knew exactly who she was and what she was worth, and that knowledge, earned through pain and sealed with love, was something no one could ever take away. In the end, she'd found something far more valuable than beauty or social standing or her family's approval. She'd found herself, and in finding herself, she'd found everything. The girl who'd been sent away in shame had returned as a woman who knew her own power. And that, Emma thought as Marcus's hand found hers, was the greatest transformation of all.